Hello and welcome, fellow awesomeologists, to Awesomeology. I'm Sue.
And I'm Ben, and in this episode, we're going to make a case for a habit that we want you to break.
And that we're
And
going to break.
and us too.
Yes.
But it's all about you, listener.
Listen, get it together out there. We are doing our best. This is going to be a tough one because it means breaking a social contract that I bet a lot of us thought was unbreakable. It's the idea that quote unquote professional courtesy, or whatever you would like to call it, that it's professional courtesy to never point out an issue with your coworker's job performance, to never turn to them and say, why do you do that thing? Stop doing that thing.
Right.
Or in a nicer way. I've heard people can be nice too, but that's just
Right.
it's not,
Yeah.
how
There
I
maybe
would
are
handle
better
it.
questions to ask, but yes. Why are you the way you are? Yeah.
Who hurt you?
So yes, this does sound pretty intense, though. It sounds like a pretty intense contract to break. So maybe we should offer a bit more context here. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Well, nice talking to you.
I don't know why that gave me such joy. Yes, obviously, we should offer more context here. We can't just tell people to start telling your coworkers what's wrong with them and then end the podcast. Although my my tendency to be, towards like chaotic evil does sounds pretty good.
It does sound like a weird, like office themed Black Mirror episode or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah,
There's a lot of chaos that could ensue. But
yeah.
yeah,
Just
that
start now.
that'll be another episode, maybe.
Right. If
Or
this other
follow
thing
it.
doesn't work, we'll do
Right.
that.
All right.
Yes. So, okay, all kidding aside, on most teams, maybe not all kidding, this kidding aside, most teams, when we have an issue with somebody's work on that team, somebody you work with, so we're not talking supervisor to employee, we are talking coworker to coworker. We will respond in one of a few very predictable ways. Number one, maybe our first instinct is to ignore it and hope that it goes away. And that always works.
Every time.
Number two, maybe we discuss it as a group and then never either tell that person or the supervisor or do anything about it. So that is, we spend a lot of time talking about pairing. That is your classic pairing right there, talking about what someone else is doing, particularly gaps in their work, gaps in their knowledge, gaps in the tools that they're using, and then never taken anywhere else. And number three, we do this thing that until we started talking about this whole process, I never realized how unhelpful this sounded. So it's this thing where rather than talking to the person who is doing the thing that is affecting your job, you go to your supervisor and you say, supervisor, you must talk to this other person because I have identified something they're doing wrong. Now you have to fix it. And that's cool.
Yeah. Let's just call it tattling or something.
Right, right, right. And sometimes we do all three of these things in rapid succession. Now, you probably already know why ignoring something isn't helpful because it does not actually go away. But let's talk about the consequences of those other two, starting with pairing, which, like I said, we have covered pretty extensively.
Yeah. Shout out to the previous episode where we talk about that a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So discussing it as a group, never saying anything to anyone who can do anything about the thing.
Yeah.
Thing, right? And then talking to the supervisor and hoping they will change the behavior. That is the way I was taught to handle it. What about you, Ben?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely part or one of the solutions, right? One of the ways that I was taught. I suppose my uh, upbringing slash previous career experience has something to do with that. The supervisor was my dad, and the
Hmm.
coworker was a brother. So pretty pretty common happening at home to go talk to the supervisor and let them know about the behavior. So we did the same thing at work, right? Now this is, when I was 10 years old up to 17, 18. So, but then after that, I did have big boy jobs that weren't with the family business. So, including being self-employed and with a business partner. And yeah, so, similar thing, maybe just a little different in the structure in that, we didn't have some sort of totem pole hierarchy or anything. Myself and my business partner were, seen as the owners, and so maybe sometimes seen as one and the same, maybe other
Hmm.
times seen as good cop, bad cop, mom and dad, whatever, right? So I know for sure, there were times when telling the other was like telling the supervisor, but it just a
Hmm.
little different scenario there with being owner, principal, president, and coworker, like all at the same time,
Right.
but
Right.
yeah, it happened. So yeah, I mean, not much different when you boil it down to like what's actually happening, but maybe just a couple of circumstances that made it feel a bit different growing up.
Yeah. Well, and the point behind this is that a lot of us assumed that so that's the contract that we're asking people to break. That was the way, and I think uh, that top down structure of supervisor accountability, which is the thing we have brought up,
Hmm.
in on this podcast before, that idea that the supervisor is accountable for what their team is doing rather than sharing accountability across the team. So then tattling, it's not tattling. It is
Yeah, it
it's
is.
the
Yeah,
thing it it's the thing that we were told is the way to handle it, right? Or that
right.
we presumed is the way to handle it. That we, rather than saying directly to your coworker, "Hey, I've noticed that you don't know this thing," we were told, and that's a big broad statement. I realize that, but
Right, right.
our assumption was that the right thing to do is go to the supervisor, and for a lot of reasons, like that's the supervisor's job.
Hmm.
They are the person that has
Resolves all conflict.
right. They have the training to handle it in the appropriate way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there
And
may be there may be truth in that, right?
right.
But
Right. And but I think as I think about the myth behind this, it really is that, and I don't want to spoil this for anybody who isn't a parent, but it's that same myth of, like, you become a parent and suddenly you know how to handle that thing,
yeah, right.
right? So it's the myth that uh, you're a supervisor, so you innately, you may have gotten training on how to handle it, which is great. You That's what you should do.
Mhm.
But you don't innately become skilled at it, particularly difficult conversations, sensitive conversations. I think as we have talked about this, I don't know if I mentioned it here or just in our team, but conversations like someone's body odor
Sure.
is
Right.
is one that comes to mind for me. Like, that is a very difficult conversation to have,
Hmm.
and the presumption is someone has to have the right training to handle that. um and it creates a situation where now, rather than really creating a sensitive way to handle that conversation, what you're doing is setting up a scenario where everybody's talking about the fact that you stink. Right.
Yeah.
So now it's somebody has to tell the supervisor has to tell you, and now just everybody's talking about it,
Right.
or you feel like everybody's talking about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I won't claim to be some sort of a workplace culture expert or anything like that, but I have learned a lot through this process that we're in right now, creating accountable teams. I have, and both of us have, many people have received some of that, supervisor, leader, management training. But like, I think that there has been almost this maybe like blatant, totally outright permission or expectation um, that the supervisor is the one that resolves issues. Like
Mm,
it is not your job to resolve an issue that you have with your coworker. That's my job as a leader, right? And I think, you know, depending on the workplace, the level of toxicity, or the patriarchal structure that might already exist, or who knows, whatever the circumstances are, that's the expectation that's been set. Um, it it exists. This is a real
mhm.
thing that happens in a lot of places, and then you can't help but think of the like snowball effect that might happen with that to all of those people that are on that team that are expected to go to their supervisor to deal with an issue, instead of just having a real human conversation with their coworker. When they become supervisors, what do you think they're going to expect, right? And
Right.
so so I guess I'm saying all of that just to not like hold anything against anyone that might be experiencing or feeling that, or maybe as maybe somebody that's creating that expectation on their team, because it might be what you were taught. It might be
Mhm.
what you experienced, with some leader in the past, and maybe your team got a lot done or was overall rather functional. That doesn't necessarily mean that you were healthy and accountable and all of the things that we're shooting for as part of this process. So
Very
yeah.
good point. Very good point. Well, I we I think this topic in particular, well, we never really want to shame anyone, but this topic in particular, we don't want to come from a point of shame for people,
Mhm.
because number one, up until 25 minutes ago on the timeline of our lives, this is what we believed. The same
Right.
thing, that this
Sure.
was this was how these things got resolved.
Mhm.
Um, and it is the way many, many businesses uh, have run, as far as everyone knows. And I do think there probably would be some people that would listen to that and say, "Oh, well, there are some things that are that way, and we talk to each other and we have good relationships." And that is very likely true, that they have good relationships. And as I'm thinking about how we're going to change this dynamic on our team, I think my question then becomes, well, then let's talk about where is the line on your team then? If you have good, you're saying, and I'm believing you, imaginary person that I just made up, uh, that you can have some of these conversations, but there's a line where those conversations end and it goes to the supervisor. Excellent. So where's that line? And if that line is anywhere short of um, the absolute things that must remain confidential, then why is that the way? I Obviously there are things that, or maybe it's not obvious. I think we should state there are still things that remain confidential on a team, right? So when we say we're going to break up pairing, we are not going to keep this like making the manager a conduit. Uh, there are always going to be situations where an employee should be coming and speaking to their manager,
Right.
uh, and that is the place to resolve it. But things like, things like an example that I use with our team today, which is that person doesn't know that the way that they should be making, like that they should be putting the disclosures on that piece of artwork on the bottom.
Mhm.
You don't have to come to me as the manager and tell me to tell that person to move that.
Mhm. Right.
Just tell them,
Yeah.
and everybody can be just fine with that. So, question for you. Uh, when you first started to reckon with this idea, right? This idea that we would eliminate the manager being the conduit for all of this information and start having people on the team deal directly with each other. What, for me, there was a series of emotions that went through my brain. So I am curious how you reacted to that initially, especially because you usually like process things and you come out with a good answer, but unlike me, who processes everything out loud.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that idea that we need to break that,
Yeah.
I don't know, that confidentiality cycle,
Right.
for lack of
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
better term?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, and this is probably revealing a bit of my nature. Like, honestly, I think I felt a ton of hope right away, like thinking about the positives that would come of this, right? Like, just while they might be uncomfortable, really healthy conversations happening between people. Because I think something that you experience when you actually like sit back and think about how this might change or help your team is you start to realize, like, yeah, some of the conversations that we have either in, like, the pairing kind of dynamic, or maybe even as a whole group or as a small group, um, they just don't need to happen that way. They can just happen like in the moment. They can be addressed like in real time. There can be a shared understanding that happen, like all the positives that come
Hmm.
out of it. So like there's just like a ton of hope and anticipation of what might change on the team by knowing that like the permission has been given, like inclusively as a whole team to do this thing together, you know what I mean? But at the same time, sure, there's also some reservation or a bit of anxiety that comes with it too, um, because a lot of it is uncomfortable, and maybe not everyone's on the same level as far as their ability to handle the real conversation,
Hmm.
and be objective from time to time, or leave personal feelings out of the way and keep the object of the conversation front and center. So just a lot of reservation about that, like how might this affect the team in a negative way, even though all of the intention is positive. And then I
Hmm.
suppose like something in the same space, that gives a bit of anxiety or concern is what information might happen between people when they believe to be working through a real issue. The example you give about the disclosure is a good one, in that maybe the direction that someone is giving is inaccurate. Like maybe the disclosure is supposed to go at the top,
Hmm.
but somebody's just using whatever they were taught or their experience or education or lack of education to provide what they feel is, true, organic, honest, healthy conversation, when in fact it's actually something that's technically wrong.
Hmm.
So then you have to like backtrack and fix that as a team, right? So I you know I'm sure that something like that last example I gave might already be happening, or maybe will happen in the future, but as I'm sitting here giving this hypothetical
Hmm.
anxious situation, I can't think of what that might be that's so detrimental to the team, or at least isn't vastly outweighed by all of the positives that would come.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's how I felt and feeling, etc.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. And knowing that the uh next part of our evolution here is really working that out, right? To come down
Mhm.
to, when is this a one-on-one conversation because it's just you and I that need to know this? When is this a team conversation? Because we have tried, I think, with absolutely great intention, to create efficiency when we are together and to get the main things done. And it's really going to run counterintuitive to some of the things we have been trying to do, which is to eliminate some of that excess chat and not have people who aren't directly involved with the project be listening to that chat. um,
Mhm.
And this reverses that a little bit because this is asking people like, let's talk about it as a team
Yeah.
and explore how that applies to everyone.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because and particularly thinking about the work we do, none of it's really in a vacuum, right?
Right. Right.
So the thing that someone learns on the project they are doing right now could apply to the other designer on a different project, and you might just not see the connection yet.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's, I guess, similar like outcome with um how we're using our time, and uh, that this might be seen as like a reversal of efficiency, because we're filling some time that maybe as we continue to work on the project stuff together and make those kind of meetings and conversations more and more efficient, and make sure that the appropriate people that are either on the project or the subject matter experts, whoever they are, they're the ones having the conversation that needs to happen. I think we have like uh, gotten rather efficient, and
mhm,
probably will continue to grow in that area as we continue to work the way that we are. Um, but if what we're doing is filling some of that saved time with conversations that should have been happening all along, I that's not a reversal or a step
mhm.
back. I think that's just another improvement, you know. And same kind of thing can happen, right? Like if we're, and maybe you even already mentioned this, if we're having these conversations as a whole team, even if somebody isn't directly involved in the thing that we're talking about or didn't experience it firsthand or whatever, by hearing us talk about a real issue as a team, the next time it happens they'll maybe be equipped to deal with it, and we just maybe can't connect those dots quite yet. But
Right.
so it's not time wasted, and it's also all time that we'll need to be really conscious about, because it could really easily become time wasted if we're not actually talking about real issues, or we
Right.
kind of like
Right.
falsely creating this, I don't know, space or this conversation only to like check a box that we're talking about real issues, when in fact it's not a real issue.
That's a really good point. Uh, and one of the next thing we are going to talk about is possible challenges.
Yeah.
Spoilers. You're going to ask me about possible challenges here
Yeah.
coming up, and that is the thing. I am not, and I'm not going to wait for you to ask me that because I, in the current makeup of our team, it's not something I worry about, but I have been on teams and uh, I can definitely picture being on teams where saying that we're going to discuss our real issues as a team turns into like, here's the weekly tattletale
Right.
where everybody is using this time and this tacit permission to discuss real issues to actually call everybody out and make sure everybody knows like I suck as bad as you suck and you suck pretty bad,
Yep.
that
Yeah.
where it can become, I think that it could devolve into retribution on a less healthy team. So
Yeah.
maybe that's like cautionary tale. If you think you have people on your team and you are considering any of the stuff we're talking about, uh, but there are people who you think would use that as a cudgel to beat each other with. So I bring up this week, yeah, Ben, you missed that thing. And you say, oh, shucks, I didn't mean to miss that thing. But really, you're thinking, oh, you wait.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Well,
as soon as there's something that you can point out, oh, look at you missed that thing. Oh,
yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah, and all of a sudden you're keeping score, right? Yeah, no,
right.
I mean, great point, and something that I think at whatever level anyone might be engaging with this kind of stuff, it's something you got to be aware of, because yeah, there could be some backfiring that happens there for sure. Yeah, and just being aware of your team and what additional prep work or agreements or expectations you might need to put in place before you dive in. Super important. Yeah. As I'm like saying all of that, I'm like trying to imagine and I think this confirms your feeling of our team or your perception of our team, and that like I can hardly even imagine what that would be like if, one person was setting up the other one to be bashed in a week, or if they started keeping score or something. Ugh,
Hmm.
gosh, that sounds, if anyone out there's in that boat, that sounds terrible. But
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
feel for you.
Yeah. And I think that means it doesn't mean that none of this process would work.
Mhm.
It means that you are probably further, you are in an earlier part of the journey
Right.
where where that kind of attitude has to be reckoned with,
Yep.
and some trust needs to be built and
Yeah.
those things. And then to work toward, being able to discuss things as a team.
Yeah. Yeah. And gosh, just keep the end goal in mind, keep the outcome in mind. I know this is something we've said more than once along the way, like just, imagine what it looks like when we're through this, or,
Right.
and we're never like all the way through it and we've reached some finish line. And but like once we start seeing behaviors change on the team and stuff, like just imagine what that looks like. And that might that imagination might be all that it takes to help someone with a poor attitude or that's holding a grudge or something. That might be all that it takes for them to be like, shoot, maybe I'll like my job more if we can just get there.
Right.
That
Right.
might sound a little too kumbaya or utopia, but it's real. It's a real outcome that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important. And, thinking about our next steps too,
Hmm.
to keep checking back in and making sure that everyone sees what that shared vision could be.
Yeah.
It's an unusual situation for us because we are without a real template. We're building this template,
Hmm.
and I think we have a clear vision of what it will be, but we don't have what we so often have, is a sort of a final form that we can demonstrate to people and say, look at how great this team does this thing. And we didn't bring that into this process with us to be able to get that clear vision for our team.
Hmm.
So I think something to think about, to continue to work toward bringing clarity for them, see what all the possibilities are. I mean, they have been great so far with, uh, because they're game. These
Right.
are some of the gamest people
Yeah.
in the nicest way possible. Uh, and I think we're really fortunate to be working with people who seem to have a high level of trust in us,
Hmm. Yeah.
seem to be able to uh, really roll with us saying, well, we're not sure exactly how that looks, but we know that this is going to be, we don't know how we get there, but here's what we think the outcomes are going to be.
Yeah.
And this whole time I've been like, okay, well, if that's what you're thinking, just tell us what we have to do and we'll
Right.
show up and be a part of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Showing up has been impressive and is just so necessary. I mean, for
mhm,
everyone on the team to show up and participate in our conversations and things that we're wanting to try and stuff have been. I mean, it's the only reason that we're still talking about this stuff is because people have said yes, have showed up, and we've seen like
mhm,
real progress. And sure, like all of this, you'd maybe love to squeeze down into a couple months or something like that. It's been longer than that for us, but that's okay. Like that's been what's necessary for our process. But relative to how long we've all been working together and how long we will work together, like it's a really short amount of time to
mhm.
see like real change happening on the team real quick.
Yeah.
You mentioned next steps. I don't know if you were segueing into our final question, but
I was
before.
not. I'm not actually segueing. I haven't
Okay.
segued once so far, but a lot of segues are happening.
Right. Before we get there, we're a creative marketing agency, right? I think something that we maybe haven't done quite directly or intentionally as part of this whole process of creating the accountable team and everything is like connecting this to who we are as an organization and our work. And obviously I don't know, maybe it's not obvious, but as a marketing agency, a lot of the people that we work with are marketing minded folks, or at least people that have that listed in their job duties, and are learning or trying to become a marketing minded person. So well, I don't know, if you don't mind, let's spend just like a few minutes talking about like how this really has been effective for us as a marketing team. How, like, assuming that, boy, I hope some of our clients are listening to our podcast, right? Like, how
Sure,
might
sure, be
this
nice.
help them, right? um just kind of like connect who we are as an organization and what we do
Mhm.
with how this is helping and changing the shape of our team.
Excellent
And
question.
for the record, listener, this is totally off script, and I'm
Yeah.
100% blindsiding Sue with this. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of things. So I am trying to connect it to all different facets at once, right, of our business. One of the things that the number one thing that comes to mind for me, knowing, and gosh, I hope this is something that comes through in what we have done to market our marketing business,
mhm,
but is the ethics behind what we put into the
mm,
work we do, right? And that has always been, you're an extremely ethical leader. The idea behind having good business ethics is to be able to look uh, objectively at what you're doing and be certain that what you're doing is right for the people that you're working for. And it is important in any business strategy firm. I think it's particularly important in marketing because marketing is so complex to connect to business outcomes sometimes.
mhm,
So to be an ethically sound marketing business, there is an additional layer of consideration that goes into what we do. Um, and we have to, one of the things we have to be able to do to remain ethical is to be able to trust that everyone who is responsible for helping our clients, helping our credit union sponsor, is comporting themselves in an ethical manner. So we have
mhm,
to be able, in other words, that was a very long way to say what we have to be able to do is have conversations about what is ethically sound. The rest of our team has to be able to take in that information and act ethically when we are not there to be responsible for their ethics.
sure. Yeah.
So they become accountable for carrying that on, carrying that forward in our business. And we cannot be there with every interaction they have with every person. We can't be the conduit through which all of that happens.
Yeah.
And the way, I believe the way that you do that, there are a lot of things you can become ethically questionable with in our business. Um, One of them, yeah, it can be what you tell people, it can be the effort that you put into it, it can be, the way you build, the way you represent the work you're doing, lots and lots of ways uh, that you could become a little ethically dicey. And our expectation is that everyone on our team remains uh, as much as possible pristine
Sure.
in terms of those ethics,
Yeah.
right? You put in the work that you've said you're going to put in, you do the things that you said you're going to do, and complete them in the time that we said we were going to complete them. We charge you what you should be charged.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, so that number one is our business ethics.
Yeah.
Um, and second, and maybe equal as far as the pitchfork that I am building in my mind here. I don't have a third though. So like the second is going to have to be where you go. And then you get the third tine of my pitchfork, which I guess would technically be a trident. Anyway, uh, second would be that desire for us to continue learning.
Yeah.
So to incorporate, I feel that this is a relatively ambitious thing to do without bringing in outside training, without, paying someone to tell us what to do. To build this program with our team is relatively ambitious.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously I'm biased, but speaks to our desire to try something, work through the process, be ahead of that curve
Yeah.
rather than waiting to make sure everybody else is successful with it and then doing it once we see 1,000 other companies
Yeah. Right.
trying it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, goodness gracious, Sue, well done for a spontaneous question thrown at you, and couldn't agree more. And I just have to say, I appreciate you recognizing business ethics and seeing me as an ethical leader. And also, I'll just put it out there that I'm sure there's been lots of learning for me over the years to get me to where I am in that space, knowing that I'm not perfect. And I'm sure I don't want to paint a picture of like me being some sketchy sleazeball in a previous life or anything like that. But I also know I also know that I'm not perfect and I've made some mistakes, and I think I've maybe learned from them. And that probably has something to do with who I am today and
Mhm.
the leader I am today and those things. And also, you know me, I'm a very active and loyal Rotarian. And there's this thing that we have in Rotary called the four-way test that starts with, is it the truth and is it fair to all concerned? And I think that like that kind of stuff comes through in the way I tick and, the
Mhm.
kind of team that I like to lead and build and stuff like that. So it really does mean a lot for you to, even briefly recognize that that makes me feel good. So thanks for filling my bucket a little bit today. Um, and then I would just add maybe the third thing on your trident, Sue,
I
is that,
tried it now.
we're just closing it all out. And we mentioned it today when we were talking about this as our team, is that our work intersects so much. I mean, particularly, the creative team, everybody, we're continuing to work and grow to be more and more agile every single day, but like we're a relatively agile team and the work that we do is happening in an agile way. Bits and pieces are moving all over the place. And so like, you know, goodness gracious, if we can't imagine a reality where we are having real conversations with people in real time, addressing real issues, owning what we say and do and commit to, like, oh, we're in for a bumpy road. So, I mean, the fact that I think we're even operating in a fairly healthy and functional space shows something about the kind of people that we have on the team and
Mhm.
how what we all care about. But also, we're all humble enough to know that we can do better and be better and be more accountable. And that's, of course, why we're doing all this and talking about all this. So I think to close the loop on the spontaneous question, I think any team can benefit from this stuff, but marketing teams in particular, or small teams that might be, the typical client that we might have where people are stretched in different ways and accountable or own a lot of different things. Just it just is so logical to start to think, do, and like act under some of the
Mhm.
principles and behaviors that this whole thing has taught us, or we're working on.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, it honestly, it makes me think too of our credit union friends, and thinking back to when I was on the front line and then when I was supervising on the front line. Um our the credit union I started at was as small as this marketing team. Uh so we had we had no, we had one less person. We had 5 people. And the idea that y- y- you would you would not take accountability for handling what was in front of you was absolutely unheard of. There was just no way. There was no way to keep business going, and not have everyone on the team individually accountable. And so I think that was a really good for me a really good jumping off point for my career to be able to experience a team where there's there was no one to turn to sometimes,
Mm,
right? Because we were such a small team that
yeah.
there's there's not a supervisor there for at every minute for me to go, oh well, I don't know the answer, you're just going to have to, I'll have to send you the manager. Well, you know, the manager's not here and you got to deal with it.
Mhm.
And then even moving into the slightly larger post merger credit union, uh, there were supervisors there who took frontline accountability really, really seriously.
Mm,
So it wasn't, yeah, like you didn't just get to elevate a thing because you didn't know the answer, didn't feel like dealing with it. You you dealt with it, uh, or you suffered. I mean, that it wasn't the best way to handle it necessarily. There was some harsh consequences if you didn't know the answer and had to pass someone off. But it was a good lesson in learning, like, no, I am an actor in all of this.
mm,
I have agency here, and I have to take my agency and my responsibility uh, uh, seriously and be able to act in this situation, not just say, well, this other person has to know, or this other person has to know, and I'm just here to count your, I don't know,
count your cash. Yeah.
count your cash,
Right.
which also, PS, I wasn't that good at. So, so I don't know what I would have contributed if I didn't do that.
Members walked in and were like, "Ah, there's Sue. She
Darn
shorted me $20 last time."
it. There probably are members that felt that way, but more often I shorted me $20, if
Right.
that
Yeah.
makes you feel better.
Sure.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was more like, hey, there's Sue. She gave me an extra $20 last
Yeah.
time.
Right. No wonder you were so popular.
Yeah. See, that is how you make friends.
Right.
It's all about the Benjamins, buddy.
Tell me about it. All
Oh
right. Do you get it?
no,
That's me. I'm
terrible,
Benjamin. I'm Benjamin.
terrible, terrible. Okay, are we
Okay,
back on?
so
Going back on
I think
track?
we're back on track now,
Okay.
and I think we are at that point where we are. Let's check in. This is a great time to just check in on. We did our all stop recently. Now that the wheels are spinning again, maybe as we took that moment to breathe. How you feeling about what we're accomplishing? Are we doing what we set out to do?
I feel back on track. I feel, when we were doing our all stop, we did have to talk about the reality that we got started talking about pairing and things got delayed and
Hmm.
pushed back and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have we've accomplished that, check that off. I mean, we've accomplished the discussion.
Yeah.
And from that discussion, we pulled out some strategies that are, I think, good. And from the team brought these ideas to
Right.
us to talk about how we're going to stop it personally,
Yeah.
what we're going to say to ourselves and to each other, some things we can do as a team to support each other. So
Yeah.
we have good ideas there, and I'm feeling confident about that.
Hmm.
And I recalled as I was putting things together for this that when we talked in the all stop, one of the things we talked about is that it's time to have the team help us direct where we're going, help guide what our next steps are. So that
Yeah.
is coming up. We have mid-year Plantopia coming up
We do.
to,
Yes.
and our intention is to talk to them about what do we need to do and what next steps
Yeah.
do you want to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to, I mean, I think today's conversation with the team about pairing was a nice example of the buy-in and the showing up from the team.
Mhm.
The next steps that we discussed during that conversation were almost entirely driven by them. So that feels great. And I'm excited that the next steps will be too. I mean, I think
Mhm.
us being there and maybe having the blessing of these podcasts as an opportunity to keep us on track and discuss between you and I about where we're at, what's next and stuff. That helps us keep those conversations rolling with our team when otherwise they might go stale or quiet a little earlier. But I mean, the fact that they're, really contributing and driving things at this point is, I guess, again, just going back to like how I'm feeling about this whole thing, just incredibly hopeful, and to see the ownership that's happening on the team is really cool. So those next steps are maybe in this moment a little bit to be determined, but the next step is to get the team together to talk next steps, and
Mhm.
I'm excited. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I feel like we're really about to turn a corner in this whole journey because we have really laid that groundwork.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of understanding now for what we're trying to do. And the next steps are that it just feels like, the next thing we could talk about is how do we get to that first final state?
Right. Yeah. And roll the to be continued
Right,
artwork.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be cool.
That'll be cool. And we'll be sharing along the way, right?
Yes, and we appreciate everyone joining us on this journey. This is terrifically rejuvenating, I think, for me personally, to have these conversations every time and to think that there are people listening and it might be helping them.
Right.
So please keep coming back to hear more. You can always follow us on social, or you can get in touch with us at our website, exclamationqso.com. We would love to hear your questions. We would love if if any of this has intrigued anyone at all,
Yeah.
please reach out and let us talk to you about where you think your first steps are and what kinds of things you think your team could be doing differently, or
Yeah. We'd love to
or
talk.
what. I don't have anything to go with the or
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. Or we learn something from you.
Yes.
That sounds fun too.
Yes.
Awesome. Did you plug the website yet, or am
I sure did.
Oh,
I did.
gosh, I spaced
Yeah.
out there for a
Sorry.
second.
I just went through it so fast.
Cool. Well, thanks, friends, for tuning in. Thank you, Sue. Everybody out there, be awesome, and we will see you next time.
The Osmology Podcast is a production of Exclamation Services. Thanks to Nick Mulliver for sound production and Kylie Ganther for our cover artwork.
Executive producers are me, Ben Bauer, and my friend Suzanne Campbell.